The city burned for 3 days. When the gates finally fell, the Roman legions marched through the smoke, and what followed was not victory, but silence broken by screams. Ancient writers tell us that after every conquest, women were taken as spoils of war, their names erased, their bodies traded like gold. One Roman general even wrote in his diary, "The gods bless us with beauty among the defeated." Behind the marble statues and the glory of the empire, there was another Rome, one that celebrated power not only through conquest, but through possession. So tonight we uncover the untold aftermath of Roman victory, what truly happened to the captured women of the empire, and whether Rome's greatness was built on their suffering. The Roman Empire didn't rise by diplomacy, it rose through conquest. From Gaul to Greece, from Carthage to Jerusalem, Roman legions swept across continents, leaving behind ashes, statues, and chains. To the victors, every conquered city was a marketplace of reward. Gold, livestock, artworks, and people, especially women. They were counted, divided, and paraded through the streets of Rome during triumphal processions. Some were sold in open auctions, others were handed out to soldiers as tokens of valor. In Roman law, a captured woman had no name, no rights, and no body of her own. She became res bellica, a thing of war. To her captors, she wasn't a person, she was property. Yet behind those cold definitions were real lives, wives, mothers, daughters, torn from their homes and thrown into a world that called itself civilized. And in the midst of it all, one story stands out, a woman whose name the empire tried to erase. It was the year 146 BCE. The city of Corinth, proud, wealthy, and defiant, had dared to resist Rome. When the final walls crumbled, the legions poured in like a storm. By dawn, the temples were burning, and the marble streets were slick with ash and blood. Among the captives was a young woman named Dione, daughter of a merchant family. In her father's house, she had studied poetry and philosophy. By evening, she stood in a line of prisoners, wrists bound with rope, her eyes fixed on the horizon where her home once stood. A centurion marked her with charcoal on the shoulder, a sign that she was fit for transport. To where, no one said. Behind her, a mother screamed for her child. Ahead of her, Roman soldiers laughed, dividing jewelry and garments as trophies. To the victors, it was a day of triumph. To Dione, it was the day her name began to fade. Days later, Dione found herself in the belly of a Roman transport ship, chained beside dozens of other women. The air stank of seawater and fear. Guards spoke Latin, a language she didn't understand, but their intentions needed no translation. When the ship reached Delos, one of the largest slave markets of the ancient world, the women were washed, oiled, and displayed beneath the scorching sun. A scribe wrote their attributes on wax tablets: age, hair color, origin, and price. Dione was sold to a Roman officer named Lucius Varro, who had fought in the battle that destroyed her city. To him, she was both a souvenir and a status symbol, proof that he had conquered not only Corinth, but its beauty. In his villa, she served wine at feasts, forced to listen as guests toasted the glory of Rome. Every smile she gave was survival, every silence was resistance. At night, when the torches dimmed, she would whisper a single word to herself, her name, afraid that if she stopped saying it, she might cease to exist. One night, while the villa slept and the moonlight bled through the marble arches, Dione made her choice. She had spent months observing, counting guards, watching where the keys were kept, noting how Lucius always left his sword by the altar after wine. That night, the air was still. From the courtyard came the sound of a fountain, and beyond it, the quiet breathing of men who thought they owned the world. She slipped from her chamber barefoot, the iron anklet cold against her skin. In her hand, she carried the small blade she had stolen from the kitchen. It wasn't for revenge, it was for freedom, or if that failed, for dignity. When she reached the door to the stables, a voice stopped her. Lucius. He had been awake. The torchlight caught his face, and hers. There was no scream, no fight, only the sound of steel falling to the floor and the whisper of her name. By dawn, the villa was in chaos. The slaves were gone, the horses scattered, and Dione had vanished into the hills. For weeks, Rome searched. Notices were posted in the marketplaces of Achaia and Sicily. One Corinthian slave, female, about 20 years, missing from the house of Lucius Varro. But no one ever found her. Some said she drowned crossing the sea. Others claimed she joined a band of escaped slaves hiding in the mountains, led by a Thracian gladiator years before Spartacus would rise. Yet one record, a faded letter found in the ruins of a villa near Capua, spoke of a woman who taught the village girls to read, calling herself Thea, the Divine One. The handwriting matched Dione's father's trade logs. Whether she lived or not, her story spread in whispers among servants, slaves, and wives, a quiet legend of the woman who defied Rome by vanishing into freedom. And in the end, perhaps that was her victory, to be remembered, not as a captive, but as a name Rome could not erase. Rome called itself the bringer of light, the empire of law, order, and culture. Its poets sang of honor, and its statues glorified men in armor. But beneath that marble shine lay a truth few dared to write. Civilization can exist side by side with cruelty. For the Romans, victory justified everything. What they did to the conquered, to women like Dione, was seen not as evil, but as the natural right of the strong. The empire that built aqueducts and libraries also built markets where human beings were sold by weight. And yet, in every act of domination, there was fear. Fear of the ones they silenced. That's why names like Dione were erased, why records vanished, why stories like hers survive only in fragments and rumors. Because empires know memory is rebellion. 2,000 years have passed, yet the shadow remains. In every war since Rome, women have carried the same burden. Their bodies turned into trophies, their silence mistaken for peace. From ancient campaigns to modern conflicts, the battlefield has changed, but the pattern has not. Dione's story isn't just about the past, it's a mirror. It forces us to ask, how do we measure greatness, by conquest or by compassion? Can a civilization that built its glory on suffering ever truly be called enlightened? The Romans believed they ruled the world, but perhaps the real strength belonged to those who endured, who remembered, who whispered their names into the dark and refused to be forgotten. History remembers the victors, but it is built on the bones of the voiceless. Dione's story may be lost between the pages of empire, yet her silence still speaks louder than Rome's triumphs. Every statue, every monument, every marble god the Romans left behind is haunted by someone like her, unseen, unnamed, unburied. And maybe that's why we tell these stories. Not to glorify the past, but to rescue the humanity it tried to erase. If Dione's name has survived even as a whisper, then so have countless others. Women who were taken, silenced and forgotten, yet whose defiance shaped the hidden history of empires. In the next story, we'll travel deeper into that world, to the chambers of Roman generals, where foreign queens became concubines of the empire, and one woman dared to turn her captivity into power, because history isn't only written by the conquerors. Sometimes it's kept alive by those who refuse to be conquered.